I never thought I'd be the type to feel blindsided by my own wife. We'd been married for 12 years and I trusted her completely. My friends would joke that I was the luckiest man alive, the one whose spouse was so faithful, so unwavering, that even the faintest thought of betrayal never crossed my mind. I believed it too, until that Thursday afternoon. It started with something small. I came home early from work, the office having wrapped a client meeting sooner than expected. The house was quiet. My keys barely clicked in the lock before I noticed the air smelled different, faintly floral, a scent I didn't recognize. She wasn't there, which wasn't unusual. She sometimes took long walks when she needed time to herself. But then I noticed the subtle disarray. A scarf I hadn't seen before draped over the back of the living room chair, the faint outline of a wine stain on the counter that hadn't been there that morning, and her phone unlocked and buzzing insistently with notifications. I hesitated, frozen by disbelief and curiosity. Something deep in me whispered, she believes she'll never get caught. That thought, harmless at first, began to coil tightly in my chest. I shouldn't have. No rational part of me should have. But I glanced at her messages. The messages weren't from friends. They were careful, loaded with inside jokes, intimate nicknames that weren't mine. They were from someone named Evan. There were pictures too, of her at a cafe, at a bar, smiling in ways I hadn't seen for years, the kind of smile reserved for private joy. My heart thumped against my ribs. I wanted to scream, to confront her immediately, but an even darker voice whispered that I shouldn't yet. Observe first. For days after that, I watched her, every action layered with suspicion. She talked about errands, work events, late nights. All the while, I noticed patterns, phone always face down, sudden bursts of laughter from texts, new perfume. My denial fought tooth and nail with reality. I told myself she could have innocent friendships, flirtations that meant nothing. But deep down, I knew. The first confrontation didn't happen in anger, it happened in quiet observation. One evening, I returned home early again, pretending to need something from the house, and found her on the balcony talking quietly into her phone. She laughed softly, then pressed a finger to her lips as if sharing a secret. My heart sank. I stepped back, retreated to the shadows of our living room, and watched her linger there for minutes before she finally came inside, calm and unsuspecting, her usual composure intact. That night, I couldn't sleep. I wandered the house, tracing familiar lines and corners, the home that had been ours now feeling like a stage she had mastered. I remembered the early days, how she looked at me with such open trust, how we shared every secret and fear. I thought of all the nights I had fallen asleep believing she was beside me, her hand in mine, and wondered when exactly the distance had begun. The slow burn reality of betrayal isn't dramatic at first. It's subtle, creeping, like the slow drip of water that eventually hollows out stone. I started noticing more. A text quickly silenced when I entered the room. A hesitation when I suggested weekend plans, the faint but deliberate avoidance of certain topics. She hadn't changed overnight. She had changed quietly, meticulously, and she had thought she was safe. The tipping point was dinner. We sat in our kitchen, the dim glow of pendant lights washing over the table. I had asked about her day, keeping my voice light, neutral. She smiled, a practiced, warm smile. Work was fine, just meetings. Her hand brushed against mine across the table, and I felt the old spark of familiarity, a cruel reminder of trust. Then her phone vibrated. She glanced down, eyes widening slightly before she returned my gaze, still smiling. I caught it, the fraction of a second, the subtle panic that passed too quickly to be real. That was all I needed. My heart sank fully. I had proof not because I wanted it, but because I'd been patient and her carelessness had left breadcrumbs. I didn't confront her that night. I let her finish dinner, I let her pour wine, and I let her retreat to the living room while I stayed in the kitchen, hands trembling slightly. By then I realized this wasn't going to explode in anger or tears immediately. It would be slow, messy, quiet, and it was terrifying. Because the person who I trusted completely, the one I had imagined walking beside me through life, was capable of secrets I hadn't even suspected. I spent the next week in a strange limbo. I was present but not really present, smiling at her jokes, answering her questions, but always calculating, observing, cataloguing. Every laugh, every glance, every casual touch was now a cipher. I could no longer interpret her actions at face value. My trust had been replaced with suspicion so deep it became a part of me. I started leaving subtle tests, little traps to see how she would react. Nothing cruel, nothing accusatory, just small things. An unexpected call, a question about her day that was slightly more probing than normal, leaving her phone in plain sight. And always, she passed perfectly. She smiled, laughed, deflected effortlessly, the same person I had always known. And yet, the breadcrumbs never disappeared. The first real crack in our life together came on a rainy Saturday afternoon. I was organizing the garage and she was inside, presumably doing some chores. I caught a glimpse of her phone lying on the countertop, screen up, notifications flashing. One message caught my eye. I wasn't snooping, not really. I simply saw it when she stepped away. It was from Evan. Missed you at lunch. Can't wait to see you later. My stomach dropped. I should have confronted her immediately, I knew that. But instead I did what I'd been doing for days. Observed. I followed the pattern she had carefully laid out. Lunch breaks, evening walks, and texts that disappeared when she thought I wasn't looking. That night, I barely slept. I replayed our entire marriage in my mind, searching for signs I had missed. I remembered the anniversary last year, how she had said she was working late, and how she seemed distracted. I remembered the weekend getaway we took 3 months prior when she received emergency texts she refused to show me. Every memory suddenly seemed suspect, and the person I thought I knew seemed like a stranger. I wanted to confront her. I wanted to scream, to throw accusations, to break the fragile illusion of normalcy. But a strange, almost cruel part of me wanted to see how far she would go, how long she could keep the lie alive. It was during dinner that week that the first real confrontation, unplanned and raw, happened. I asked her casually, almost too casually, about her plans for the weekend. She hesitated a fraction of a second, almost imperceptible, before replying. Nothing special, maybe some errands, maybe a walk in the park. Alone? I asked, voice steady, trying not to give away how much I already knew. Her smile faltered, not completely, but just enough. No, why? With a friend, she said, then added quickly, just a friend. The way she said it, so defensive for such a small lie, confirmed everything. I felt a mix of relief and heartbreak. The relief of knowing I wasn't imagining things, the heartbreak of realizing the person I loved had been lying so carefully, so convincingly, for so long. That night, I confronted her, not with anger, not with accusations, but with quiet observation. I sat on the edge of the bed as she got ready for sleep. The room was dim, the only light the faint glow from the street lamp outside. I know about Evan, I said quietly. Her hand froze over her toothbrush. She didn't speak. I didn't need to. I saw the messages. I saw the pictures. I know, I continued. My voice broke slightly, but I tried to keep calm. You believed you could keep this from me. You believed I would never notice. She finally looked at me, her eyes wide, but not defensive, just vulnerable. There was no excuse in her expression, no attempt to deny it, just the raw, human recognition of being caught. I didn't think it would matter, she said quietly, almost to herself. I didn't think you'd find out. I didn't mean to hurt you. It was the first time she admitted anything, and it hurt worse than the lies themselves. We didn't talk long that night. Words felt inadequate, and silence heavy with unspoken truths filled the room. I realized then that the slow burn of betrayal wasn't something that could be resolved in a single confrontation. It would take time, patience, and brutal honesty. Over the next few days, I watched her differently. I observed not because I wanted more proof, but because I had to understand how she could live a double life while still being capable of love, or at least the version of love we had shared. She seemed torn. Every smile at home now seemed forced, every affectionate gesture calculated but also tinged with guilt. One evening I followed her, not in the way you might imagine lurking or spying, but by coincidence I happened to run into her at the cafe she sometimes went to. She was sitting with Evan, laughing, touching his arm. The sight hit me like a physical blow. I had seen the signs before, but seeing them in the open, undeniable, made my stomach churn. She noticed me almost immediately. There was a flicker of panic in her eyes, quickly replaced by something else, a strange calm, almost resignation. We didn't speak then. I left quietly, walking home in the rain, letting the cold wash over me. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just walked, letting the reality settle in. When I got home, she was waiting. She didn't ask where I'd been, didn't try to cover anything. She simply sat at the edge of the bed, hands folded, eyes downcast. I know you saw me, she said quietly. And that was the moment I realized that confrontation doesn't always come with fireworks. Sometimes it's a quiet acknowledgement, a mutual understanding that something has changed irrevocably. I didn't speak immediately. I sat beside her, letting the weight of the week, the betrayal, and the love we still shared press down. There were no accusations, no shouting. Just two people confronting the reality of a fracture that had been growing silently for years. We sat in silence for a long time. The air between us wasn't just heavy, it was fragile, like the space between two glass panes that could shatter with a single wrong move. I didn't want to push, and she didn't try to justify herself. It was as if, in that quiet, we both acknowledged the truth without needing words. Finally, I spoke, keeping my voice measured. "Oh, why, Laura?" She swallowed, her eyes finally meeting mine. "I don't even know how to explain it," she admitted. "It wasn't about you. Not really. It was about me. I was lonely. I missed feeling seen, wanted. And he made me feel alive in a way I forgot I could feel. But that doesn't make it right. Not for you, not for us." I listened. I wanted to scream, to cry, to accuse, but I didn't. I wanted her to tell the truth, and she was finally doing that. Her honesty, painful as it was, felt like a tiny thread we could grasp onto. "I loved you," I said quietly, even when I didn't know it, and I still do. But this changes things. I can't pretend it didn't happen. "I know," she whispered. "I'll do whatever it takes to fix it, if that's even possible." Over the next few weeks, we didn't rush. There were no dramatic gestures, no promises of instant forgiveness. We took time apart, yes, but not in silence. We spoke every night about small things at first, then about the cracks that had grown between us. She told me how she felt unseen, how she had sought validation outside our marriage. I told her how I had noticed the subtle changes, how I had wrestled with denial and heartbreak. One evening, we decided to sit down together and make a plan. Not a plan for a perfect marriage, but a plan for honesty, accountability, and rebuilding trust. We agreed on boundaries, no contact with Evan, transparency about schedules, and the commitment to communicate even when it was uncomfortable. We set small goals, a walk together every evening, date nights once a week, and weekly check-ins to discuss how we were feeling. The first few days were awkward. She would glance at her phone and then put it away. I would flinch at little hesitations, small silences. But gradually, those moments became easier. The tension lessened. She started opening up again, not just about the affair, but about work, friends, her fears. And I began to share too, not just about anger or pain, but about my own struggles, my loneliness, in ways I had buried. It wasn't a perfect healing. There were tears, arguments, moments of doubt. But there were also moments of clarity. When she reached for my hand in the morning, when I caught her laughing genuinely, without pretense, when we could lie in bed and talk about the future without fear of deception. One evening, months later, we were sitting on the porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon. She leaned against me, and I felt the weight of everything we had survived. The lies, the heartbreak, the quiet betrayals, and the tentative rebuilding that followed. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice soft, earnest. "I don't expect forgiveness overnight. I want you to know how much I regret it, how much I want to make this right." I kissed the top of her head. "I know," I said, "and I'm trying. We're both trying. That's what matters. We're not the same as we were, but maybe we can be something stronger, if we're honest." It wasn't a fairy tale ending. There were no sudden magical resolutions, no instant erasure of pain, but there was something more difficult and valuable, a fragile, deliberate choice to keep going together, not out of convenience, but out of the recognition that love, messy, flawed, complicated, was worth fighting for. And slowly, with careful patience and daily effort, the house that had felt like a stage of betrayal began to feel like home again. Not perfect, not untouched, but real, with all the scars and cracks that honesty leaves behind. I realized then that trust doesn't disappear entirely when it's broken. It's rebuilt piece by piece, brick by brick, often slower than we'd like, but with a strength born from surviving the fractures. And in that slow, quiet way, we began to heal. Not because the affair never happened, but because we faced it together, with eyes open, hearts cautious, and hands still intertwined.